Hello everyone, welcome to Trade Breakdown and EU. In today's breakdown, I'll be breaking down two trades with you. Now, some of you might have already seen the signal that I put out yesterday, and that was basically a buy signal, right? Showing where my drawn liquidity is and what is my bias for the day, right? Yesterday, my bias was bullish, and my priority had been to look for longs towards the weekly CRT high, right? Now, first of all, let's start off with the weekly time frame to see what was my higher time frame thought process that led me to determining that high is my drawn liquidity. So on the weekly time frame, you can see that last week we tested this key level in the form of this order block, right? And the retracement profile that we had been expecting and that had started from a few weeks earlier ended. And then after that, we started our new move in our new expansion journey higher towards the weekly range high right here. Now this week I wanted to look for a weekly range expansion higher towards the weekly CRT high. You can see we purged this CRT last week, right? And with it, we tested a key level. Now, this week, my objective was to expect price to take out the opposing range high or the opposing CRT high. Now, the thought process here was simple, right? We entered the retracement profile after testing this weekly order block, and now another expansion leg has started. And my drawn liquidity, first of all, for this weekly expansion range higher is this CRT high. Now, if you're wondering how this candle right here is an order block, even though it hasn't purged any liquidity, then the answer is that this particular candle filled liquidity in the form of testing the previous order block to the left of it. That's why it's considered a valid order block. Now we know that for a candle to be a valid order block, it has to either fill liquidity in the form of taking a high or a low, or it has to no, it has to either fill liquidity or it has to purge liquidity in the form of taking a high or low, right? And in this case, you can see that it filled liquidity in the form of testing the previous order block, the previous weekly order block, and then price closed above it. So because of those two protocols or those two main factors, it's considered a valid order block. So on the weekly time frame, I determined my drawn liquidity and my buys to be bullish and higher, right? And that was my weekly time frame thought process. Now let's go down to the daily time frame to see what this week out there. Now here on the daily time frame, the thought process for both of the trades were different, right? You know that I took two different trades. Now for each one of them, the daily time frame thought process were different. For the first trade that I've taken in London Opal Kinzol, it had a different thought process, and for the second one, the framework was completely different, right? So let me first of all start with the higher time frame thought process for the first trade, and then after that I will explain the second one later in this video after I finish this one. So for the first trade, I was looking for this daily fair value gap or this daily FEG to be left unfilled, right? And the reason why I expected that to happen is because we are in a kiss of death or KOD phase of the sequence, right? We've taken out the weekly CRT low and then we expanded higher. We had the order block entry first, and now we are just about to take the weekly CRT high, right? But before that, we had this counter move in the opposite direction and we had this sort of retracement profile. And I expected it to end here after we tested this uh, 4 hour FEG. You would see that in a minute. And I wanted to see Wednesday to expand straight away higher towards the weekly CRT high as a case of death expansion, right? That's what I was expecting, right? And I wanted to trade the 4 hour CRT straight away at a key time without waiting for this FEG to be tested, right? Or this Tuesday's candles to be purged, right? So my drawn liquidity was higher and my bias was bullish for the day. And also I built this narrative that I will look for a 4 hour CRT trade right away, straight away inside London Opal kill zone, right? Now let's go down to the 4 hour time frame to see how I selected a CRT there on the. So on the 4 hour, you can see right here, what happened on Tuesday is that we purged liquidity below these equal lows, right? And we also tested this 4 hour fair value gap. And after that, we closed higher and found this new 4 hour key level in the form of this order block. Now, just like every day, I waited till London opened to see what sort of price action do we have during the Asian range in CBDR, right? Before making any trading decisions. And then I'd use that price action on the 4 hour and use as a framework to either select a CRT or to build a narrative, right? So on Tuesday, you can see that we formed this 9 p.m. candle, and you can see it on the lower time frame that it was a ranging candle and it formed a ranging profile on the intraday charts. And also you can see that this 4 hour candle formed just above the open of this order block, which is our key level, which is our higher time frame key level. So after seeing this, I expected price to purge this CRT at a key time during London Opal Kin zone, and I then also waited for price to test the open of this order block, and then that would act as a catalyst for to make price expand higher, right? That is the narrative that I built on the 4 hour time frame for the first trade, right? We had a key level in the form of this 4 hour order block. We also had the CRT just above this order block, and then the rest I waited for it to be purged at a key time to take an entry there and ride it higher. Now let's go down to the 15-minute time frame to see how did I took an entry there and how did I executed it. So on the 4 hour time frame, you guys saw my thought process behind it, right? And how I built a narrative, right? I took the order block as my higher time frame key level and took the 9 p.m. candle as my CRT, right? And you know that the 9 candle, I took that as a CRT because first of all, it had purged liquidity, it had generated liquidity in the form of ranging profile, forming this ranging profile during the Asian session range, right? And second, it was formed above a key level at a key time, right? That's why I took the 9 p.m. candle as my CRT, and I built that narrative on the forward time frame. Now let's look and see what was my thought process behind my entry on the 15-minute time frame and how did I took an entry here. On the 15-minute, the first thing I waited for is I waited for the CRT to be purged at a key time, right, and press to test the 4 hour order blocks open. What happened is that first of all we purged it at 1 a.m., right, which is outside the London Opal Kin zone, and it's not a key time for me, so I considered that purge as an unvalid one, right? And also the purge wasn't convincing. It wasn't convincing in the sense that it hadn't happened at a key time, right? So I didn't consider it as a valid one for me. So what I did is I waited for it to be purged correctly again at a key time before I take an entry here, right? Now, usually you'd see that I take order block entries most of the time, right? But if you've seen the execution I shared with you yesterday, then you'd see that I actually took a turtle soup entry here. And let me explain what was the reason behind the turtle soup entry. First of all, I waited for the CRT to be purged correctly at a key time, like just like I said before. And what happened is that price came down below again and purged this low at the London Opal Kin zone after 2:30 a.m. Right at 2:30 a.m. And with that, price also tested the 4 hour order block, right? And but it doesn't end there. Also, along with those two factors, along with those two things, what had also happened is that we had an SMT divergence with DXY. So what had happened is that EU took out this low, but on DXY struggled to take out the high that it formed earlier, right? So because of that, I had more conviction in this trade. So I was confident enough to take a turtle soup entry here without a confirmation in the form of a model or entry or another block entry, right? The purge had happened a key time and price tested the key level, and then second we had an SMT divergence with DXY, and we know that an SMT divergence is more than enough confirmation to suggest that there is non-symmetry in price. The price is now in a non-symmetrical market condition, and the current order flow is unlikely going to continue, and we can expect a reversal, and you can see that's exactly what happened. Now the reason I did not now the reason I wait for order block entry most of the time is because it has a conformational aspect into it, right? And most of the entries that I've shared with you and most of the breakdowns that I've shared with you, you would have seen in those executions that almost all of my entries are like almost most of my entries are like order block entries, right? And that is because it has that conformational aspect to it. And when I take those order block entries, it gives me more confirmation and I'm more convicted in that idea. But in this case, you can see that the SMT divergence that we had with DXY gave me more than enough confirmation to take an entry straight away, right, with the turtle soup without waiting for an order block to be formed. That was my thought process for this entry, right? And along with this, this move down lower, right, you will notice that it also tested the 4 hour FVG with it, right? So it had more than enough catalyst and key levels to push price higher immediately, right? I took a ton to soup entry here. So because of that, I put my stop loss below the 4 hour order blocks low to give it some breathing space, and that was like the invalidation area for me at that time. So I put my stop loss there. Now also right here, you can see that you could have taken a model 1 entry here as well by waiting for this order block to be found and then take an entry there, and that would have also worked out perfectly as well. Now after that, after price expanded high, you can see price reached around 3 hour where I closed it during London lunch because I saw some signs of reversals there, and that's why I made sure to exit at the right time in the right place possible without holding to my initial buys, right? Which means I adjusted on any scenarios, right, and made informed decisions based off of it. And also, if you've reverse engineered my trades, my previous trades, then you'd see that I close most of my trades right around 3 hour, right? This is like my average risk to reward ratio that I usually aim for, right? Now there's a whole lot of story behind why I've chosen 3 hour as my go to risk to reward ratio, and I'll explain that to you in a future video. The thing is that my average risk to reward ratio that I aim for is 3 hour, right? And there, the reason why I close my entry and exited there is because first of all I saw some signs of invalidation and signs of reversal happening, and another thing is that we had reached the 3 hour, so I closed my entry there. That was the first trade that played out for me, and that I executed, right? Now let me break down the second trade that I executed after taking the first one. Now first of all, let's go back to the daily time frame to see what was my thought process there. On the daily time frame, after the New York Open kill zone ended and London close kill zone started, what happened is that price came down below and took out the Tuesday's candle low and tested daily FVG or the daily fair value gap, right? Now, when I saw this, I dumped the ideal narrative that I'd built during the first half of the day and adjusted to this new price action and this new scenario and this new framework and made another narrative based off of it, right? In which I considered this Tuesday candle as my new CRT. I took this as a CRT right after we purged it on the lower time frame, and also with that, also started looking for a model 1 entry there towards the weekly range high. Now even for this trade, my buys and drawn liquidity were the same, which were the weekly CRT high and the buys being bullish. The only thing that was left for me was to build a proper narrative behind it and select a CRT on the 4 hour time frame. And for that, first of all, I took this daily candle as my CRT, and then I went down to the 4 hour time frame to build a much more sharper narrative and refine this CRT even more. Now on the 4 hour time frame, what you can see is that we first of all took out this low, which is the daily CRT low, and also with that you can see that this is the 5 a.m. candle, right? We purged it as well, and you can see the 5 a.m. candle closed right above this low, and this low is basically a higher time frame key level. We can consider this low as a higher time frame key level, right? So I took this 5 a.m. 4 hour candle as my CRT, as my micro CRT on the 4 hour within the macro CRT on the daily time frame. Now, before we had purged this low, I didn't know if this was going to be a CRT or not. But once we purged the Tuesday's candle low, and I saw that we have now confirmation on the lower time frame, and we now have this new narrative. I then after that point, I then consider this 5 a.m. candle is my CRT within the macro CRT on the daily time frame, and I started looking for longs towards the weekly CRT high above us, which was my drawn liquidity, right? Now, also another reason why I had conviction in this narrative that I had built is because once this Tuesday lows were purged, we also, along with that, we reached the 50% of this 4 hour dealing range, right? And also we tested the 50% or the consequent encroachment of this 4 hour fair value gap, right? You can see it right here. And with that, everything was aligned with each other perfectly. And after that, I started looking for a model well entry on the lower time frame with the same drawn liquidity and target higher, which is the weekly CRT high. With this trade, I took a typical CRT model 1 order block entry, right? Now, in these two trades, you would notice that for both of them, my drawn liquidity was the same, right? Which is higher, but the narratives that I had built for each one of these concepts and each one of these trades actually were completely distant and different from each other, right? And the first one, according to my system, I expected a kiss of death sequence right away and built a different narrative that I was looking, right? And built a different narrative. And in that one, I looked for a CRT trade right away without letting price touch the Tuesday low. And you can see that for the first half of the day, price did exactly that, and it gave me the 9 p.m. 4-hour CRT candle, and I took a turtle soup entry thereafter to the SMT divergence and test of key level, and then till the end of New Year opal kill zone, we found bullish price action, and you saw that I executed that price action perfectly and gotten out of that trade with a 3R there, right? And gotten out with profits. And then I closed my entry once I signs off invalidation and reversal. And then I waited for new price action to form to see what price it does. And then when price touched the Tuesday low, instead of forcing my earlier buys in my earlier narrative, I changed that and adjusted to this new price action that we built, and built a much more and a new sharper narrative accordingly, and took another excellent entry there, right? Now, as I've said in earlier videos, your job is to follow your system, right? It just adapt and evolve to the new cases and the new scenarios and price actions and frameworks, and take entry days and execute them accordingly, no matter what, and regardless of your emotional and sentimental biases, right? You don't have to consider any of those biases. You just have to follow your system, do and expect and anticipate price to do whatever it is showing you, not whatever you want it to do, right? That's the first thing. It's not about being right or wrong. It's not about being right or wrong, but it's about executing the right trades, following your system, entering and exiting at the right time. And that's what trading is all about.